They laughed before I did. Not nervous laughter. Not awkward laughter. The kind of laughter that lands and stays. The kind that tells you this was planned. My mother-in-law held the empty gift box in her manicured hands, smiling like she'd just told a cute joke. "Oh, honey," she said sweetly, tilting her head, "we forgot to get you a gift. We only remembered the important people." The room erupted. I felt every ice slide toward me. My cheeks burned, but my spine stayed straight. That was my skill, years of practice. Sitting quietly while being made small. "My name is Claire. I'm 32. I'm married to their son." And, at that moment, I realized I was never considered family, just a tolerated attachment. Around me, the evidence glittered. My sister-in-law cradled a designer handbag like a newborn. My father-in-law admired a gold watch, turning his wrist so the light caught it just right. Someone tore wrapping paper. Someone clapped. No one looked at me. I smiled. A soft one. The kind women learn early. The kind that says I'm fine when you're anything but. My husband, Mark, sat beside me. Silent. Staring into his champagne like it might save him. He didn't say my name. Didn't clear his throat. Didn't stand up. That hurt more than the laughter. "Well," my mother-in-law continued, patting my hand, "you understand. Gifts are for people who really matter to the family." I nodded. Inside, something shifted. Because this wasn't the first time. The forgotten birthdays. The missing place card at Thanksgiving. The jokes about how I married up. The constant reminder that I was lucky to be here. This was just the first time they did it publicly. Deliberately. With witnesses. I took a slow sip of my drink and scanned the room. Not with embarrassment, but with clarity. Faces flushed with wine. Smiles too wide. Confidence born from certainty. They were sure of their power. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't come empty-handed. Not this year. Not tonight. And as my mother-in-law raised her glass for a toast to family, my phone vibrated softly in my lap. One message. 3 words. "We're ready." I smiled again. This time it was real. I didn't look at my phone again. I didn't need to. I already knew what "we're ready" meant. See, families like Mark's don't wake up cruel one day. They practice it quietly over years, until it feels normal. They practiced on me from the start. When I married Mark, his mother hugged me too tightly and whispered, "You're very simple. We'll fix that." At dinners, she introduced me as Mark's wife. She works, you know, like employment was a novelty. When decisions were made, I was politely ignored. When jokes were told, I was always the punchline. Mark noticed. He always noticed. He just never intervened. That night, as laughter settled back into conversation, he leaned close and murmured, "Just ignore it. You know how they are." That was the moment something hardened inside me. Because what they were was careless. They assumed I had nothing. No influence. No leverage. No seat at any table that mattered. They didn't ask what I did for work. They just heard the word consulting and stopped listening. They never wondered why I never needed help. Never asked how I stayed calm while being dismissed. They mistook my silence for weakness. And as dessert plates were cleared and the champagne flowed, my mother-in-law laughed loudly again and said, "Next year, maybe you'll earn a gift." I met her eyes across the table. And for the first time, she looked away. Because somewhere beneath her certainty, she felt it too. The shift. She just didn't know yet what it meant. The laughter didn't last. It never does when people sense they've gone too far, but aren't ready to admit it. As the evening dragged on, conversations splintered. My sister-in-law whispered behind her hand. My father-in-law checked his phone more than necessary. Mark drank faster than usual. I stayed quiet, observing. That's when my mother-in-law decided to push again. She stood, tapping her glass. "Before we wrap up the night," she said, smiling at the room, "I just want to say how proud I am of this family. Everyone here contributes. Everyone here carries weight." Her eyes slid to me. "Everyone," she repeated, "except those who benefit without giving back." The silence that followed was thick. Heavy. Someone coughed. Mark stiffened beside me. Still nothing. I finally spoke. Is that meant for me? I asked calmly. She blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. Oh, don't be sensitive, she laughed. If it doesn't apply, it won't bother you. A few people smiled. Nervous ones. I nodded slowly. That's fair. But my heart was racing, not with fear, but recognition. Because this wasn't about gifts, or jokes, or even respect. It was about control. They needed me small so they could feel large. They needed Mark quiet so the hierarchy stayed intact. And they needed the room to believe I deserved it. I excused myself and walked to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My reflection stared back, steady, composed. I checked my phone. Another message had arrived. Documents uploaded. My breath caught. Because now it was real. Not a theory. Not a plan. Proof. And suddenly, the jokes at the table didn't feel cruel anymore. They felt reckless. I straightened my dress, unlocked the door, and walked back out, knowing the next thing that happened would change everything. They just didn't know how yet. It happened during the toast. Of course it did. My father-in-law stood, glass raised, his voice thick with confidence and wine. To a successful year, he said, and to those who are in their place at this table. A few people clapped. I didn't. Instead, I reached into my purse. The sound was small, but in a quiet room, it carried. I pulled out my phone, stood, and smiled. Before we toast, I said evenly, there's something I think everyone should see. My mother-in-law's smile froze. Claire, this isn't. Oh, it is, I replied. Calm. Polite. Unshakable. I tapped the screen. The television behind them flickered, then changed. A folder opened. Names. Dates. Wire transfers. Someone gasped. That's not possible, my brother-in-law muttered, half rising from his chair. But it was. Every family investment they bragged about laid bare. Every shell company. Every expense quietly rerouted through an account they didn't know was traceable. An account I managed. My mother-in-law's face drained of color. You don't understand what you're looking at. I do, I said softly. Because I set it up. Mark finally stood. Claire, what did you do? I looked at him then. Really looked. What you never did, I said. The room erupted, voices overlapping, chairs scraping back, hands shaking. The laughter was gone. So was the power. I picked up my glass. Oh, and the gift you forgot? I added. It's not missing. I smiled. It's pending. And in that moment, as my phone chimed again, I knew. They had just lost everything they thought was untouchable. I left before anyone could stop me. Not dramatically. Not crying. I walked out the way people do when they've already won, quietly, with no need for applause. The cold night air hit my face, and only then did my hands start to shake. Not from fear. From release. I sat in my car for a long moment, breathing, letting the years replay. The swallowed words, the tight smiles, the way I kept shrinking so the room could stay comfortable. Then the shaking stopped. Pain has a shelf life. Clarity doesn't. I wiped my palms on my coat and opened my laptop. Everything was already lined up. Timelines, contracts, email trails. I'd spent months noticing things they assumed no one else would bother to understand. Money that moved strangely. Decisions made too fast. Confidence built on shortcuts. They thought I was invisible. That was their mistake. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted consequences that echoed. I made 3 calls. Sent 2 emails. Signed 1 document. Each move clean. Legal. Irreversible. By the time I started the engine, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message was longer. And it ended with the words, proceeding as discussed. I smiled into the dark. They had no idea what kind of morning they were about to wake up to. By morning, the house of cards started to sway. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone lit up. Mark's name. I didn't answer. I already knew what he was going to say. Instead, I watched the notifications roll in. A bank alert. Then another. Then an email marked urgent. The accounts they used to float their lifestyle were frozen, temporarily, legally, quietly. An audit request had been triggered. Not by me directly. By the compliance team I worked with. The same one they'd unknowingly hired 6 months earlier. Timing matters. Mark showed up an hour later, breathless, eyes wild. "My parents are panicking," he said. "They think someone reported them." I looked at him, calm as ever. "Someone did." His voice dropped. "Was it you?" I stood, finally meeting his gaze. "I didn't do it to hurt them," I said. "I did it because they forgot I was important." Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far off. Not for them. Not yet. But the machine was moving now. And once it starts, you don't get to ask it to stop. They called me by noon. Not to apologize. To negotiate. My mother-in-law's voice trembled through the phone, stripped of its sugar. "Claire, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." I leaned against the kitchen counter and listened. No interruptions. No corrections. Let her feel the silence. "This audit," she continued, "it's hurting the whole family. Mark says you might be able to explain things." I smiled, slow and sad. "Explain what?" That's when she snapped. "You embarrassed us. You turned everyone against us." "No," I said gently. "I showed everyone who you already were." She inhaled sharply. "What do you want?" There it was. The question they never thought they'd have to ask me. "I want distance," I replied. "And honesty. For once." The line went dead. An hour later, Mark packed a bag. He didn't fight. Didn't beg. He just looked tired. "I didn't know you were capable of this," he said. "I didn't know I had to be," I answered. As the door closed behind him, my phone buzzed again. One final update. Investigation escalated. And for the first time in years, the house was quiet. The investigation wrapped faster than anyone expected. That's what happens when stories are built on shortcuts and arrogance. Once light hits them, they don't just crack, they collapse. Their accounts weren't just audited. They were unwound. Investors pulled out. Partnerships dissolved. Invitations stopped coming. The same people who laughed at the dinner table suddenly didn't return calls. I watched it all from a distance. Not because I was afraid to look, but because I didn't need to. Mark filed for separation 2 weeks later. His parents asked for a meeting through lawyers. I declined. I'd already said everything that mattered. One afternoon, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a small velvet box. Empty. I laughed. Not bitterly. Relieved. Because I finally understood something that took me too long to learn. The people who measure worth with objects never know what to do when they lose power. I donated the last of the shared funds to a foundation that audits family-owned businesses for fraud. It felt poetic. Necessary. On New Year's Eve, I poured a glass of champagne and toasted alone. Not to revenge. To boundaries. To clarity. To never again shrinking so others can feel tall. They forgot to give me a gift. So I gave myself one instead. Freedom.